Hi there, it's Mr. Fowles, and we're going to be talking about the war expanding, and this is of course the Revolutionary War and how things are happening in it. And we're just going to go over it. So let's start with a little Bellwork. This is directly TCAP practice question, so it's actually pretty good. Recognize the course of conflicts, including things. So here's a timeline, and there's a way that things are occurring here. British forces occupy New York City, American forces defeat British Saratoga, France forms alliance with the United States, British military concentrates operations in the South, British forces surrender at Yorktown. There's a good chunk of the Revolutionary War for you, just in one timeline. Based on the diagram above, why is the Battle of Saratoga considered the turning point of the Revolutionary War? And so, I guess you kind of have to think about what happened before and what happened after. So take a minute to think about that and see if you can come up with an answer. And the answer is J. It persuaded France to join the American cause, because that's what happened directly after. So this is a cause, this is an effect. So that kind of shows that. Alright. Some vocabulary. Marquis de Lafayette, Valley Forge, George Clark, John Jones, Wilderness Road, and Privateer. Some fun vocabulary words. So, after the Battle of Saratoga, the nation got a few new allies. The Battle of Saratoga, you may recall, was the battle that prevented England from taking control of Hudson River Valley and therefore New England. And it showed that America was able of beating the British in regular war. And that got the attention of a bunch of different nations. Tadeusz Kościuszko, a Polish fellow, he had already been helping. But some of these other people entered into the fighting thereafter. Marquis de Lafayette was from France, Bernardo de Galvez was from New Spain, and Baron de Kalb was German. And all of these guys left their home country to come and help the patriot cause. They had all sorts of different reasons, but the French had reasons for fighting Britain. They were mad about the French and Indian War, and they were mad about the 7 Years' War, of which the French and Indian War was a part. So, France and England have not been very friendly historically, so this was just a way to kind of expand that. Bernardo de Galvez, he was the commander of the Viceroyalty of Mexico and of New Spain, and he was living in Mexico. And he saw an opportunity for him to expand Spain's empire in North America by helping get rid of England, who was another colonial power. So he was a Spanish person, and then Baron de Kalb was a German who'd fought in the French army, maybe with or maybe not with Marquis de Lafayette. But he was just served as a general in the American army. So we had these foreign generals fighting in the Continental Army, and it was good because they brought a lot of needed expertise into this fledgling Continental Army, this new army. And this is kind of stuff I already said. France wanted to wait until America had proven it had a chance at success, which goes back to the Bellwork here. The Battle of Saratoga was what helped France come into the war. So another event here was the winter of '77 at Valley Forge. And this is a picture of it. It was in southeastern Pennsylvania, is Valley Forge, and the army, Washington's army, just kind of bunked down. And it was a cold, brutal winter. They didn't have shoes, very, very good. You can see even there, that could be, it could be the boots, it could be kind of tattered trousers. Some of them didn't have shoes to walk in. Their feet were cracked and bleeding. They died of disease. Roughly 25% of the army died of disease that winter. But winter of '77, and people could have deserted, but American soldiers did not. Some did, but one thing that I was saying about it is that the Continental Army and the militia were both fighting for their own liberty. They weren't just fighting for pay. They had a reason to be there. And then So that was a suffering winter, the winter of Valley Forge, and it's impressive to know that the military persevered throughout that winter, camping out. So that's kind of what's happening over in the Eastern Theater, but as you recall, along the western edge of the colonies lie the Appalachian Mountains, and not much activity occurred west of there, but activity did in fact occur. Britain had settled some outposts out there in order to keep settlers, American settlers, from moving out there, because that area was reserved for Native American ground. So a few folks, well, George Rogers Clark in particular, this fella here, he asked for permission to raise an army to go capture those outposts, and he did so using a road that this fellow here, Daniel Boone, had cut, called the Wilderness Road. And it's this kind of orange road here, and that's where it cuts. And this cut into this part of Kentucky, and it got, it was able to help people move out through the Cumberland Gap here in northern Tennessee, which is a gap in the Appalachians where people were able to navigate through, and that's important to know, especially for Tennessee history if you're a Tennessee student, and you'll probably learn much more about that. But this fella here, George Rogers Clark, was you can see he's in his Continental Army gear, and in May of 1778 he took a group of people out to Kaskaskia, which is in southwestern Illinois now, and he took over a fort, and he was pretty effective at taking over forts. He took over Kaskaskia, and then he caught one at Vincennes, and he surprised them. It's really kind of a funny story. He executed a few Native Americans in plain sight just to scare the dickens out of the British, and it worked. They surrendered without much of a fight. So we've got these weird theaters here. We got the Washington's Army freezing in Valley Forge, and we've got Clark's army out on the frontier, and we have foreign generals helping us out. But there's another component to our war, and that actually was an American Navy, which is funny because America had no navy. Navy is very expensive to equip and build and maintain. So what we did have was a large fleet of trading ships, and some of these trading ships signed on to be privateers, and they're basically a private navy, and they had the permission to shoot. They had the permission of the president to attack British merchant ships. It was probably already okay because they were already in a state of war. And John Paul Jones was a very popular, historically well-known mercenary, and his story is in 1779 he was in charge of a ship called the Bonhomme Richard, which is like the good man Richard, and they went all the way to England to attack. They didn't just patrol American waters, they went and patrolled English waters, which is, if you can imagine, very dangerous because there's no backup. So these guys were very sure of themselves, and they were fighting a ship called the Serapis. I'm not even sure if that's how we pronounce it. Serapis. And basically what happened, he rammed that ship with his ship, got them right in next to each other, and they blew each other to bits. John Paul Jones's ship actually broke in half, and he shimmied over to the other ship, and they rode that home after taking it over. The Serapis cracked and fell, and the captain surrendered. But John Paul Jones took over, and at the beginning of the fight, the British commander asked him if he was, going to continue fighting, and Jones said, "I have not yet begun to fight," which has become a Navy slogan. So it's a little interesting sidebar more than anything else, because the impact was slight. This was a land war in North America. This was not a naval battle, especially once the French entered in. So here's some classwork, and these are page numbers for the textbook if you're in our classes. probably go back and get some of those answers. I gave you some of these, I gave you that, and you should have number 1 as well. And that's it. 1 would be France, Spain, Germany, and Poland. They had cracked feet, very cold, no blankets, no shoes, and here he slaughtered Native Americans in full view of the fort. Alright, that's it. Thank you very much.